Dit is Drop or Dram, de podcast voor whiskyliefhebbers. Van beginner tot kenner. Schenk je favoriete glas in en geniet met ons mee.
Nog steeds vanuit een van de mooiste whiskycafés die je hier in Nederland kan vinden. In het prachtige Den Haag zit ik nog steeds in de Malt Vault. Uiteraard ook een in Utrecht wat absoluut een keer de moeite waard is als je een whiskyliefhebber bent en wil ontdekken. Want je kan hier prachtige flights vinden en prachtige ontdekkingen doen. En als we het over ontdekkingen hebben, nou ja, daar hadden we het al in onze reguliere uitzending over. Dan had ik het over een nieuwe ontdekking, voor mij althans een nieuwe ontdekking, Nc'nean. En we gingen nog even wat dieper in, want we hadden het over interessante geeky dingen en daar houden we wel van. Dus ik zit nog steeds even met Matt. En Matt Hastings is de blender ook van Nc'nean Distillery. En ja, die ging eigenlijk gelijk helemaal los over yeast strings, new ways to make whisky. Ik zie echt, hij zit tegenover me met een grote glimlach. Dus hij zit er nog steeds volop in. Maar just we needed to talk a little bit more about making whiskey new style, especially in Scotland. My good friend, my dear friend, we made several episodes on John Glaser, Compass Box, talking about a quiet rebel. He loves to do new things, but you're doing new things, and we're talking about not the obvious things. So there's obvious is taking different kind of woods, and now slowly within the Scotch whiskey industry we see a little bit of that coming along, different types of woods, different types of spirit things. But you were talking about yeast strings.
Yeah, it's.
Is it done? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Got it. That's better. So yes, yeast strains. There's a few things that we fundamentally do differently in Nc'nean, and the goal is to create great spirit first. And selfie time.
Always very important during an episode, recording an episode.
So I'm going to go over very quickly in like the chain of production, the things that we do differently that fundamentally affect the quality, the texture, the weight, and just the deliciousness of our spirit. Firstly, we're 100% organic. We're the only 100% organic single malt distillery in Scotland. There are others that do bits every now and again. Some people like Dornoch do a fair chunk, but it's not complete. I fundamentally believe organic barley makes a massive difference. When you've got barley growing in an environment with a wider variety of nutrients in the soil, it's more interesting things for yeast to eat, and more interesting things for yeast to eat produces more interesting flavour compounds from the other side of that. So that's step one. Step two is in fermentation. The norm in Scotland is use that one high yield strain of yeast and ferment for like 50-55 hours. If you
just
use
for efficiency?
For efficiency, yeah. Basically, so again, geeky. M strain yeast stops producing high levels of ethyl alcohol after about 50 to 55 hours. So everyone's like, oh, cool, it's made the alcohol that we needed, we're done. But yeast does so much more than make alcohol. It produces, they're called referred to as secondary metabolites, and it's esters, aldehydes, sulfides, phenols sometimes, but just it's flavor compounds. And the longer you leave it, the more time you have with more different yeasts, the more interesting things you can create. So we use two yeast strains in tandem. One of them being the high ester yeast that produces more is mid and long chain esters. Mid chain esters are juicy fruits. So when you taste whiskey and it's got that really fresh, vibrant fruitiness like peaches and apricots like we have in Nc'nean, that's all from fermentation, and that's all from paying attention to your yeast and your fermentation. And the long chain esters are fats, they're oils. A bottle of olive oil is a bottle of long chain fatty acid esters, and that is texture, that's weight, viscosity, richness, creaminess in whiskey. And all of that comes from paying attention to fermentation, giving longer contact times for the yeast. We do between 68 and 114 hours rather than the 50 to 55, which just gives yeast more time to work, more time to make those interesting flavour compounds.
So the wash you put in there before distilling already has so much more different flavours and different aspects than the normal beer
would be
wash.
The norm in Scotland, yeah. The goal is to create great spirit first and foremost, and by doing that you need to pack a lot of flavour in early doors. So we take a little bit more time in fermentation, we pay a little bit more attention to our yeast, we sacrifice a bit of yield. We don't produce as much as we physically could, but we produce the spirit that we want. On top of that, when we get to distillation, we run what's referred to as a tight high cut. So we start collecting after the heads really, really quickly, and then we cut way before we get to a traditional tails cut in the whiskey, which means we only get that kind of like top half of the spectrum of flavour. So we're only getting the bright, clean, juicy flavours that we want, and we're not getting the things that you'd associate with the second half of the run, the things like the leather, the tobacco, the spice, the richness. So the result is this very clean, citrusy, fruity, bright, delicious spirit that's good to go sort of as is. And then our approach to maturation is more like finishing that spirit than it is maturing and fixing what is just high alcohol spirit.
Yeah, the maturing is something that, by law, it needs to be 3 years old. But it's like you said, it's more like finishing touch. It's not the traditional 60-70% of the wood would play a huge part in your flavor compound. So, in that perspective, if that's so important in the beginning, how much is the wood of an influence for the casks you use?
I mean, the wood's still a big influence. It's whiskey at the end of the day. It's still a major flavour contributor. It's just not the only one that we focus on. I wouldn't be able to give you like a percentage of what flavours we get from which, but I can tell you that, like in our tasting notes, when we say lemon possets, like creaminess and citrus, and then we say stone fruits, so the peaches and apricots, and then we say caraway rye bread, which is like spicy, bready, warm richness. Of those three that we list out, the first two are all from fermentation. Yeah. Like, you don't get peach flavour from casks, or you don't get a really strong peach flavour from casks. You get a different kind of peach flavour. The flavour compound's called beta-damascenone, which is like it's the flavour compound that makes up rose oil.
We're getting very, very geeky now.
Yeah. But
that's the thing. If you talk to a master blender and a master distiller, you go like, yeah, right, yeah. I haven't got a clue what he's talking about, but at least it's all about the flavor. It's all about flavor compounds.
Yeah.
What I always try to say, it's not about how many of the compounds you have, how many flavors you got, how many different things you've got. It's all about the balance. How does it work together?
Exactly.
And does it work together?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it's the most fun job I have at the distillery is getting to taste all these casks and put them all into a kind of a cohesive batch. So we'll sit down, we'll taste everything. So our process in Nc'nean is way more hands-on than it would be at a traditional Scotch whisky distillery. I taste every single cask that we use, build like this kind of flavour. It's almost like a colour palette of like.
That's why you like running so much.
Yeah, I need to. Yeah.
That's where it's gone wrong with me.
But you can build your spectrum.
I forget after the tasting. That's my biggest problem. No, but very interesting. But how much do you produce? Because you're still a very small distillery. 2017, first period 2020. Mm-hmm. We're now talking 2023.
We're a very small distillery by Scottish standards. It's you measure a distillery in its output in litres and pure alcohol.
That's just for
LPA.
the geeks that they need to know.
So ours is 96,000, which out of context sounds like quite a lot, but nearly everybody else measures in millions. We're the 5th or 6th smallest distillery in Scotland.
At least enough bottles to be out there on the shelves here.
Yeah, there's enough whiskey for us to make about 200,000 bottles of whiskey per year when we've ramped up production to like that level.
Very, very nice. And still experimenting in the near future with different G strings, but I know you've got one core expression. We talked about it and we tasted it, but all those single casks or different markets or specials, that's something also very, very well, more or less something part of your core range for different markets? Or?
Yeah, kind of. So we do 2 seasonal releases per year that are, let's say, like just a step below being part of a core range. Every spring we release something called Huntress, which is all about hunting for new flavours, and it's about those yeast experiments. We dedicate 10% of production per year to trying new yeasts. It's very throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks kind of attitude to making whiskey, but you get very interesting and unique results by playing around with one of those core ingredients. The other special release is called Quiet Rebels. We release that every autumn, and it's all about the people that work for us. So every year I sit down with one of our employees and I make a whiskey with them, for them, from our stock. So if you pick up a bottle of Quiet Rebels and you'll see the name afterwards. So the first one we released was Annabelle. The second one was Lorna, who was our first employee. She's our main distiller now. You get to taste a little bit of their taste in whiskey, of their personality, of the things that they enjoy. And it's a really nice way of kind of understanding the small team that works for us.
Very, very nice. To dedicate something not only about the flavors but the people and the story behind it, and that what is the great thing about whiskey and the spirit we're talking about and we love so much. It's not about the liquid itself, it's about the stories that the liquid make up. And the more you drink, the better the stories. That's always this part.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. No, but that's a really, really beautiful approach. Near future, because you've been distilling and talking about the yeast strings and probably getting a different approach to making whiskey. Are there new things you can secretly talk about what you're working on? Or?
Well, we're going to taste one tonight. That's going to be fun. Because the Huntress release for this year is ready, it's bottled, it's just making its way out.
So people, if you're listening in about a year's time, you're tasting history and trying to get a bottle, you can't. But there will be a new one.
We do have a couple of like very small projects that I'm working on with different collaborations. It's something that I'm really keen for us to do moving forward. It's all good and well, us being sustainable, us being kind of the front of the industry. We'd like to take more people along for the journey where possible. So the more collaboration work we can do with other spirits companies, with other whiskey brands, with other drinks products, or just other products that we're legally allowed to use in Scotch whiskey, then the better for us. We can get more people on board with our messaging and more industries following suit and being better for the planet.
Like you said, like Amber said before, it's getting people into this beautiful drink and getting to know not only whiskey on a different side of the tradition, but also new drinkers, new generation, new ways to look at the world, and just enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's about it.
That's the main thing. Drink whiskey and enjoy it.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, isn't it? So I don't know what we're talking about anymore. Shall we pour a glass and head up to the bar?
Let's definitely pour a glass and head up to the bar.
Thank you, Matt.
No worries.
Dit was Drop or Dram. Vergeet niet om je te abonneren op onze podcast of kijk op onze website www.dropordram.nl. Tot de volgende keer.